Hey everybody, and welcome back to part 4 of my Deploying Your Own Firewall at Home, a tutorial in OpenSense series. I apologize these videos are taking a little bit longer to get out, but with me going back to school, as well as the summer coming around, it's going to be a little bit more sparse that I get the opportunity to record these. So one of the things I'm going to try and do is just try and be a little bit more off the cuff, which should let me get these out a little bit faster, and hopefully having a less of a script doesn't distract too much from the content. So what we're going to take a look at today is the idea of geo-blocking inside of OpenSense. So what is geo-blocking? Geo-blocking is using geographical tags that are applied to public IP addresses in order to let us filter inbound and outbound traffic by what country that traffic is tagged as coming from. Now, it's important to note that these geotags aren't perfect. You can't set up a whitelist of countries that you want to only allow traffic from and expect everything to work perfectly. Because by the nature of the internet, there are IP addresses out there for very common things that you're going to connect to that just don't have a geotag applied to them. So the way that I recommend using geotags and geo-blocking is to actually just block specific countries, either outbound or inbound or both, that you do not anticipate having or wanting any traffic from. So how do we do this? Well, you're going to need a MaxMind API key. The OpenSense documentation goes through how to get this, and later in this video I'm going to make a section showing how to sign up for that, get that API key, and how to put it into OpenSense correctly. But for first, I want to take a look in OpenSense, assuming we have that API key. How do we create the alias? How do we select what countries we want to be applied? And then how do we make a firewall rule that leverages that alias? So as we've done before in this series, we're going to go to Firewall and Aliases. We're going to create a new alias, and under Type, we're going to see Geo IP. Now you'll get a warning message when you click on this if you haven't already set up your MaxMind API key. And again, we'll circle back to that. But once you create this here, and you can give it whatever name you want, I just like to call it GeoBlock. You can say whether you're going to take a look at IPv4, IPv6, or both. I ignore the categories line here. And here you'll select the countries that you want to have applied. Now if you're going to make a firewall rule that blocks, these are going to be the countries that you block. If you're going to make a firewall rule that allows, these would be the countries that you allow. Now, OpenSense does have a limitation. If you look in the upper right corner here, you'll see that I've used 31% of the available alias table entries. If you create a lot of these geo-block rules or these geo-IP rules, you can very quickly fill this table. So I would really recommend creating one rule that's going to kind of generally cover your bases instead of creating a bunch of them, because each one of these categories, for example, here's one of the rules that I have set up. Each one of these categories is a number of aliases being applied, a number of IP addresses being registered. So I'll go back to a blank example here. So I'm going back to add IP. So from here, everything's broken down by region, and then from there you can select the countries that you want to apply. It's a pretty substantial list. I'm not going to give you recommendations on what you should or shouldn't apply. It's going to be different for everybody based on what websites, what services, what apps on your phone you want to use. What might make sense at first is to actually just create the alias, and instead of making a block rule, create a logging rule, which is an allow rule in the firewall with logging enabled, and then you can kind of monitor the traffic coming through to figure out, hey, I actually do use this website and it looks like I use it all the time on my phone. Maybe I don't want to block that specific country. And later on, I'll also show you how you can troubleshoot this a little bit. But say you wanted to block Chad, Togo, and Tunisia. I'd select these three here. We can see 3 out of 50 selected. The other thing you can do is you can deselect all or select all for any given category. and then give it a description. Again, you're going to want something that's very easily readable and that you'll remember what it is when you circle back. Click save, and just like I have here, this geoblock rule should be applied. All right, so how do we even get this working? So the service that we use is called MaxMind. MaxMind offers a free API key that you can use to look up these IP addresses and their geotags. And here you can see the total number of ranges that they have and the last time that it was updated. So if we go to the MaxMind website, we can click sign in. If you don't have an account, go ahead and create one. And once you're signed in, you should be met with a page kind of like this, where on the left-hand side here, we can go to manage license keys, and you can generate a new license key. You'll get a warning here that legacy keys will not work. That's okay, we're using the newer version, so we'll hit confirm. So once you've set up your license key, what you're going to be left with here is an account ID and a license key. These are going to be blurred on the screen, of course, but this one, the account ID is just a few numbers, and the license key is just a string of characters. There's a couple underscores in it. Make sure to keep those handy. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull up Opnsense's documentation on how to set this up. Again, that's going to be linked in the video description. Now note, this has changed over time. You used to not need the account ID. Now you need both the account ID and the license key. So be aware that, you know, if this video is more than a few months old, you might want to reference this documentation to see if anything's changed. That's the downside to making this type of video, is this stuff changes all the time, especially as Opnsense updates. Now, this link here is going to need to be edited. As you can see here, it's HTTPS account ID : license key. So we need to replace the account ID with our account ID from MaxMind, and the license key with the license key. You don't need to change anything else. And one thing I've noticed is there used to be a problem where when you were pasting things in certain programs, it would add spaces. So you'll want to make sure that there's no spaces added, but that the underscores stay where they're at. So with that URL in hand, we come back over to Opnsense. And from the aliases page on the top here, you'll see the Geo IP settings tab and a place to paste in that URL, which I'm not going to do here, of course, because I already have a valid one in there. You'll notice this one looks different. Again, like I said, this has changed. This is an older MaxMind API key that I'm currently using. You'll just paste in your newer one. You'll hit apply, and you're going to get a warning message that it takes about an hour for that to update. Let it update. Once this date changes and you see a total number of IP ranges that's similar to this one loaded in there, you're good to go. Now, what do we do with these aliases? How do we use this? So let's go to rules. I like to create most of my rules as floating if I'm going to apply them to multiple interfaces. And remember, it's always better to block or allow the traffic as early in the flow of traffic as possible, for the sake of not forwarding traffic through the firewall just to block it later. So what we can do is we can create a new rule. You can select whatever interfaces you're going to apply to, or if you're applying this directly to a single interface like the LAN interface, you wouldn't have to do that part. We're going to block that rule, and we're just going to block a destination. And if we scroll up into the aliases section, you'll see Geoblock, like we created earlier in the aliases section. So this rule would block all traffic from any selected interfaces inbound heading to the destination of the geoblock. So any of the countries in that alias. If you were to make this a pass rule, it would allow any traffic going to a destination of any of those countries. And like I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to create a way to see what's happening, you would just enable this log rule, leave pass on, and then you could see what's happening inside the live log to kind of track and see if you want to be able to permit or block those countries specifically. Mind you, you're going to want to turn off logging for your other rules while you do that, otherwise you're going to get a lot of noise in there, or you want to filter down your live log. Now let's say you've enabled this, you've blocked a bunch of countries, and you're trying to figure out why something's being blocked. You look in your live log, you see it's being blocked by your geoblock rule. What the heck is happening? Why am I blocking this website? If you Google the Geo IP lookup for MaxMind, you'll see this first link I have here is Geo IP Databases Demo. you can paste an IP address into here, hit view results, and it'll show you what country it's coming up as. So if you have a website that's not working after you enable Geoblock, do an NS lookup on that website, get the public IP address or public IP addresses, bring them in, paste them into here, see what countries come up, and Bob's your uncle. Now you'll understand these are the countries I need to allow or block, whether I want that website to work or not. So I know this video was a little bit shorter than the other ones. I'm hoping to be able to keep these sub 10 minutes just to get this series out, because I've got a bunch more information and tips for OpnSense that I want to get to. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. If you guys have questions on this, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to have discussions on how this stuff works. I've been dealing with OpnSense for quite a while now. And on that note, until next time, thanks for watching.